Hi everyone and welcome to One Autistic Person. This is the 39th video in a 50 video series that I'm doing going through the autism quotient statements. The autism quotient is a pre-screening tool that is often used as part of the assessment process for autism. When I was going through that process, as many people do when they go through the assessment, we have to look at everything as a deficit because a diagnosis can only be given, and that's the way that it's framed within the DSM-5. So that it can be diagnosed. But I started these videos off wanting to look at things from a benefit perspective, and not looking at it as a deficit, and then they've sort of morphed into looking at them more as difference than deficit, because they get quite repetitive, and I sort of changed the way I was looking at it as well. And I wanted to sort of look at it from how it felt from me personally, but also how it may be experienced by others, and also sort of talking about how to manage the situation and things like that it's referring to in this. Like with all of my videos, the biggest thing that I love people to do is to communicate within the comments. Let me know and other people know how you experience autism. I think the best thing we can do as autistic people is share our experiences with each other. The world feels different for us, so it just feels like that there are other people that are going through the same things as you are, and I think it can be really helpful. So if you can drop a comment, that would be brilliant. Obviously, if you could subscribe, that would also be perfect, because it allows my channel to get out to more people. So as I say, this is the 39th statement within the autism quotient, and that is, people often tell me that I keep going on and on about the same thing. Now, for me, this is a definitely agree, and you can sort of see this from two sort of separate parts, whereas sort of like monologuing, but I think that comes from cyclical thinking. So it comes from having cycles of thought process, so what I'm going to do is explain how that feels for me, what that looks like when I think it happens, what and why I think it happens. In this video, I am going to focus predominantly on negative cycles of thought, but this can happen with both positive as well as with positive as well, which is debilitating, but in a different way, because I can't focus on anything but that thing I am looking forward to. Usually, when it happens in a positive way of thinking, if I'm looking forward to something, I will think about it over and over again and what it's going to be like, because I'm looking forward to it, to the point of where I am completely unable to do anything else until that thing happens. That tends to be when it's positive, it's always looking to the future. Something's going to happen in the future. These negative cyclical thinking processes, for me, it can be both the past and the future, as I'll touch on in the remainder of the video. So the first thing I'm going to look at is when it happens in more times than this, but these are the main reasons and main times that it happens for me. So this is when it happens for me. So social situations, I can worry about a social situation if it's going to be one that's different to one that I usually go into. I worry about pretty much every social situation. I worry about going to the shop sometimes. So it can be a future. This is one where it can definitely be about the future. Worrying about how a social interaction will go. Will I stumble over my words? Will I do something stupid? Will I say something that's out of turn? Will I not be able to speak? Will my social anxiety overtake me? Will I start monologuing and talking about something else because of the fact that I can't stop thinking about that? But as well as that, I very heavily focus on past social situations, and this is sort of overthinking what I said, how the other person reacted, what their reaction's been since, if they've said something about that situation, or they've done something afterwards that I've then misread, or read correctly, and I can't work out what's going on with it. So social situations are very complex and happen all the time from both sides, from things that have happened or things that are going to happen. So I'm worrying about things happening, but I'm also worrying about things that did happen. I quite often feel huge amounts of like pangs of anxiety because of something that happened many years ago, and I think that it was so awkward and difficult, and especially when I think back to school, I think of it as very, very awkward all of the time. It happens in work environments, so it can happen with people, so in the social side of things, so that social element is attached to my work environment, but also when I'm doing work or when I have done work. So if I'm doing work, I overthink it and make sure that it's done to absolute perfection in my view. Then I worry about it once I've sent it, and then I worry about the fact that the person might not like it and it might not be right, and I have to tell myself that everything's going to be okay, and I ask for feedback a lot about what did you think of that, and see what people say. But I will overthink it, and even when they give me the answer, quite often I think that they actually don't like what I did, and it becomes again a cyclical thought process, which I'll go through how the sort of steps of that in my head go in a second. Societal situations, so I get very, very frustrated and very hyper focused on certain things that are happening societally. I'm not going to get into what that means, but it could be politics, it could be what's happening environmentally, what's happening to other people, what's the way society is set up, that people aren't being treated correctly, that society isn't fit for purpose, all of those things, and I get very stuck in that thought process and can think about it for days and days and days, and it's all I can talk about is that thing, and everything I talk about ends up getting back to that thing. I end up just monologuing about something that I just can't stop thinking about. When something changes or is going to change, or has changed, until my head's settled with it, so if something's going to change, I worry about every possibility of that change happening. As the change is happening, I want to make sure that the change happens with the least amount of pressure to myself and anybody else, and then worrying about the fact that if I know something is going to change, worrying about that in the future, because I want to make sure that everything's done right first time, even though I know that it's not possible most of the time to make sure that's the case. When something feels formal or official, so I really struggle with formal situations. I overthink them and overthink them and overthink them, and as I was saying in a previous video, always want to be those 5 steps ahead, and I'm very much stuck in my mind there. And if something formal is going to be happening, again, I will not think about anything other than that thing, and quite often won't be able to do much else. In relationships, so again, this is a social thing. So relationships, both friendships and romantic partners, and familial relationships. So relationships with people in my family. So I will think I'm doing stuff wrong all the time, or that I've upset somebody when I haven't upset them. Why are they doing that thing? Did they do that thing because of the fact they're angry with me? And the list goes on. Again, this comes back down to social interactions, but it can happen even with people who I feel comfortable around. And I put during a time of, it's not just during a time of change, but also if I perceive something as changing, I'll start thinking about the fact that it is changing, and I won't know. And if I don't know why, I don't know what's going to happen, I become very, very focused on the fact that it feels like it's changing. So I will talk about it all the time and talk about what could possibly happen, even though I don't even know what is going to happen or if anything will be happening at all. So they're kind of the main things that it happens with. It happens at work, in social situations, and when I'm thinking about societal stuff, quite often that's where I become quite hyper focused and really can't let it go, and my brain will not stop thinking about it. And it's which kind of brings me to what it actually feels like. And this is going to be difficult to explain. So this is what it actually feels like for me. So basically, this happens when something happens and then I fixate on it, and it's like I can't control the thought. It's like when you're hyper focused on something and really enjoying it, but it's the opposite of that. It's a feeling of dread, a feeling of worry. So I'll think about it, why it may have happened, what it is that's happened, what could have caused it, what's going to happen because of it. What I can do to change anything to make it better. Is there anything I could have done better? So I'm basically going over what I could have done and can I make it better? So I'm looking at past and future at the same time. Could I have made it better? Can I make it better in the future? It's very, very stuck in this looped thought process of thinking the same thing over and over again, but coming out with different ways of how I can come to a conclusion at the end and find a solution for it. So I keep thinking about it over and over again. So I'll come to the conclusion, but then I'll start thinking about it again, and I will start that process again, and I'll be thinking about all different things that time, and then I didn't think about this thing, and I didn't think about that thing, and then I'll monologue about it, and then somebody else will throw something else in. So I'll say with my housemate that I'll have a major monologue to him about it, and then he'll say, but have you thought about it this way? And then that makes me think about it differently, but then it means I have to go back through the cyclical thought process again. It can be extremely stressful if it's something that is challenging that I'm needing to deal with. It can really have massive effects on my anxiety, which can cause panic attacks. And it can make socializing in general really, really difficult. And it can make me mistrustful of people, because especially if I feel like somebody isn't being honest with me or is hiding something from me and isn't being truly honest about the way they feel about something, but I'm misreading the situation or even reading it correctly. I obviously don't know at that point, but I'll be focused on it quite heavily. So it means that if it's gone into that negative headspace, I have to go through, and I have to go through this. Not like I can stop the cyclical thought process easily. I have to do something to do that, as I'll get onto at the end about managing it, but I'm stuck in it. And until I realise I'm stuck in it, I can't get myself out of it. So what I'm now going to look at is what it can look like from the outside. So what it can look like for other people. So what it can look like from another person's perspective, based on the fact that you might be having a meltdown, or I might be having a meltdown in that situation, I might be having a panic attack, I'm coming across as very anxious and stressed, so it can come across as distress. But that can also come out as what is perceived as anger or aggression or frustration. It can be completely seen as misunderstanding and be very upsetting to the other person, because I've misunderstood the situation. I've misunderstood what's going on and totally misread it and think something's completely different to what it is. It can destroy relationships because of the fact that it's hard to let go of that thinking, and if you have said everything that's in your head, then it can be quite difficult for the other person to forget that. It can be really confusing, as I may feel something has changed, but others don't think anything has changed. That does happen quite a bit with me, that I feel like something very small has changed that's had a major impact on me. The other person then doesn't understand why I've seen that change, but to me it is, and I am so hyper focused on it that it becomes that's the only thing that I can really focus on it, like sort of laser focused on it. And it can be annoying. I've no question of the fact that it's been annoying to the people around me when I've had to go through the same thing over and over again. And sometimes it can be months of something. If it's that I've got to, it's in a social situation that's been ongoing. It's like every time I have a social interaction, there's more added onto it, and then I have to talk about it and have to go through it. That must be very, very annoying from other people's perspective. Luckily, I do have people in my life that understand it and will allow me to do it, and will interject when needed, and will then give me a response that I can then allow me to go through it again. And they kind of understand I come to the best conclusion that I can by the end, if I'm allowed to go through those cycles. So yeah, it can be from the outside, it can be quite complex and quite confusing. I would say confusion is probably where most people sit with it and think, why are you overthinking this thing? Because every human being overthinks, everybody overthinks at times, but I seem to do it with pretty much everything that happens, very small things. And my housemate has said, I can tell when you've latched onto something. You'll have latched onto something, and that will have started a thought process, and then you'll just not be able to get yourself out of it until you do one of the things that I'm going to go on to in a little while. So I'm now going to have a look at for me personally, why I feel this happens for me, where it comes from for me, what the base root cause is for me. So I'm going to have a look at that, so where the root causes of this are. So where I think this comes from, and the root causes for it, for me, from sort of looking at it and assessing why this happens for me, is misunderstanding people's intentions. I struggle with I struggle understanding people's tone of voice. Social cues are difficult for me. Sensory overload. There's other things that like alexithymia, that type of thing, that just make it very difficult. Obviously, there's the double empathy problem and double empathy paradox, that you're not experiencing things in the same way as the other person. So I see things very differently, and I'm confused at why the interaction's gone the way that it has, or I feel like it has.
Not knowing why someone would do what they did because it was so different to what I would do. So yeah, so if I've spoken to somebody about something and then they've done something that I then perceive as negative, it's like, and it's so different to what my expectation of that situation was. I will overthink why they did that, because because for me that would have taken steps for me to have thought, well, I'll do that, and it was opposite to what the expectation was. So it then gets into my head to why did that person do that thing? And I think that sort of links into the next point that I'm going to make, which is anxiety caused by past experience. And because I've been in those situations before where manipulation has been involved in things, and dishonesty, and to some extent when I was at school, a lot of bullying and that type of thing, and sort of negative reactions coming back to me because of things, I think I latch on to, my brain latches onto that, and it causes a huge amount of anxiety that past things are going to repeat themselves, and that's going to happen again. And actually that comes from just me misunderstanding social situations in general. Autism and OCD have a lot of crossover, and I think this is for me a socially obsessive thought process. So this is based on me being I become obsessive on that thought process to try and work out what's going on and make sense of a situation that is so confusing for my brain. Just general confusion as to why the world is the way it is, and why people make the decisions they do. And I would say this is where the societal thing comes in. I'm very confused at the world generally, and why we have so many so many ways of being that we've always been this way, and that's the reason why we do it. And my brain goes to, but it's not the best way of doing things, so why are we doing this? And actually it's having a negative impact, and it's having a widespread negative impact, and then that's making people unhappy, which is making, and then I start getting stuck in this is linked to that and that's linked to that, and if that changed, then all of this would change. And then that means that I get a huge amount of thought process going into something that really didn't need as much thought process as it. I'm not, well, maybe probably it does, because I would love to see the world change. So thinking about it's not a bad thing. It's just when I'm stuck in it sometimes for days and not being able to get out of it. And I have been like that recently with politics. Again, not going to get into the reasons why, but I have been. And a need for routine and sameness, which kind of is linked to the OCD side of things, but it's quite common for us as autistic people to need a routine and to feel safe within a sameness situation. And it certainly is the case for me that I feel safest when I'm in a routine situation, even if it's a loose routine, and that I know, but as long as I know what's going to happen, I'm fine. And this comes from a lot of not knowing and not having a routine in place for that thing that's going to happen. It's something out of the norm for me, out of what my sameness feels like. It feels otherness to me, and therefore is threatening and worrying, and is then linked back to anxiety caused by past experience, because of the fact that when I've been taken out of that routine, negative things have happened. So that's where I think for me that it comes from. Obviously that will be different for everybody. Everybody experiences this differently. If you do experience it, then you definitely are going to probably have different ways of experiencing it. So what I'm going to look at lastly is just how I personally manage this for myself, because I have a few little coping mechanisms to deal with it. So let's have a look at how I manage it. So how I manage it, there's a few little things I do. I have people that sort of form different parts of the process of me accepting things and going through that cycle. So I will tend to go straight to my housemate, will be the first person I speak to, and he will get the monologues and the stress and the frustration and the messy stuff that's coming out of it. That is when it's all a mess. So he'll get 5 or 6 iterations of something, and then I'll move on to, I will speak to my mum, and I will have put something together about my thought processes on it based on the conversations I've had with my housemate. My mum will put context from her perspective. And then quite often I'll speak to my best friend about it, but it's more that he'll just either back up what I'm saying or throw in something that other people might not have thought about from my perspective of how I might be experiencing things, because I think he's the person that understands me the most when it comes to my thought process. So that's where I sort of go with it, but it's kind of with my best friend, it's more of just a general chat, and it would be within that I will talk about this thing that's happening, and he will have given me opinions and other things to think about. So it's not like a formal thing of me doing that. I do write it down. I like, if it's really complicated for me, I will write it down. It allows me to put it to one side, and because I've written it down, it kind of leaves my head for a little bit. It kind of cuts the cycle for a bit, and it allows me to come back to it and assess it more objectively later. Which can often be quite helpful for me to look at it, because when it's written down, sometimes it just seems very different and it seems a bit more detached, and I can sort of look at it from that objective perspective. And then finally, remind myself that we all think differently, and I may be wrong, and ask for clarity from the person if I can. But definitely after I've calmed down, I'm not worrying so much about it, but just a clarification of saying, how did you feel about that situation? Was there anything wrong with it? Whatever. Obviously, I'm not talking about a specific situation here, but sort of clarification for yourself. Again, once you're not in that sort of mind space of it whirring around in your head and you're going through the cyclicalness of it. So that's this video. Hopefully that's been helpful. Like I said earlier, any comments that people want to make, it's what I made the channel for people to be able to communicate with each other, for me to say how I feel about things and how I experience things, but also for people to share those experiences between themselves as well. So if you could drop a comment, that would be perfect. And then obviously all of the other things like liking, sharing and subscribing helps with the algorithm, which basically means my videos will get out to more people. So that's really helpful to me, and it means more people can see my content, which is always nice. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks. Bye.